Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of College Hockey Talk. On today's podcast, I'm joined by the head coach of the Princeton women's hockey team, Cara Morey. Welcome to the podcast, Cara, and how's everything going?
It's going pretty well considering we're living in pandemic times, but thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And thank you so much for coming on. And my first question to you is, a few months ago, the Ivy League announced that your season was going to be canceled. What was your reaction to that news, and what have you been doing since to prepare the team for next year?
Oh, that's a good question. I think back when they canceled the NCAA tournament last spring, we originally thought it would be like a month or two, and so we all left campus and the players were training so hard getting ready for the upcoming season. And then when things kept going worse with the data of the pandemic and the COVID numbers over the summer, I think a lot of us anticipated it would be really difficult for them to have a season. So when the season was canceled, it was obviously very painful, especially for a coach. It's the best part of your life. It was kind of predictable in some ways. So we had a feeling it might be happening. And so the majority of our team ended up deciding to take the year off so they could keep their eligibility, so they could play all 4 years at Princeton. And it's kind of been that day that repeats itself and almost never ends for a year. So it's been a roller coaster. We've had some awesome team discussions. We've learned a lot about ourselves, and the players learned a lot about themselves throughout this, but we miss each other. And so we've had a lot of team meetings, trying to stay connected. We had fitness challenges, we had service engagement, and we really have just started really focusing on, we think we're at the end of this and we're getting ready for next season.
Yeah, and something else that some people might not consider is you're basically going to have two new freshman classes coming into the team next year. How are you going to try to help their transitions into college hockey?
Well, it's going to be interesting because the original first-year class that was supposed to come in this year, they'll have had a lot of time away from school. And then the incoming class, we really only brought in 3 to join that class. So for them, they almost have a little bit of an advantage because for the most part, they've been allowed to play hockey and train, and they were in school this year. So their transition might be slightly easier. But this might be the 1 year where our new players have an advantage over our veterans. Usually it's harder for the first years to come in because they don't know what college hockey is, but most of our veterans, have had to find really creative ways to train. They haven't played hockey in 18 months. They haven't been able to train. And so some of our first years coming in that have been playing all season long, they almost have a bit of an advantage at this point.
Yeah, and I guess obviously you're going to be putting those freshmen into high key situations during big games. Is that something you're prepared to do?
Absolutely. Really, we give them the first couple months to be freshmen. And then usually when November hits, we're like, okay, that excuse is gone. And really whoever's going at the moment plays. So we've had a lot of freshmen that play big minutes right off the bat. I think, Sarah Philia, Maggie Connors, they came in as freshmen. Mariah Keppel, they came in and made an impact right away. And then some years it takes a little bit for them to understand the speed has changed. Everything has to be faster. Our systems are different. Our language is different. And so it really goes player to player. And we're always prepared to put first years in there as soon as they look like they're ready to go.
Now, have you been watching any college hockey this year?
I did not. It was really painful. I'm not going to lie. It was really painful. You're happy for the people that get to play. You're happy for the coaches that get to do their job. I knew it was really tough for them at the same time to try to find a way, but it was too painful to watch until the Frozen Four. I did watch the semis and the final game.
Yeah, and do you think the Ivy League's absence had any effect on this year's college hockey season? Because in my opinion, I feel like it did, because when you look at the rankings, it seemed like it was harder to rank the teams without your team and teams like Cornell in the top 10 mix.
Yeah, I agree. I think 8 of our ECAC teams not being in the mix really skewed the rankings. They skewed the numbers. The selection committee couldn't really go by what we call the RPI, which looks at the numbers for who gets in. And teams like us, Cornell, Harvard, those teams are perennially in that top 10 listing. So it shifted things around. I think they had trouble measuring how good are these teams because there was no crossover and there wasn't teams like us playing.
Now, what are your goals and expectations next year for your team and for yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've been changing it as it goes. It's so fluid. I had expectations for knowing last year I felt like we were going to go to the Frozen Four. I felt this year we were ready to go to the Frozen Four, and so much has changed roster wise. Like we have a few players that are in the mix for the Olympics that might not even be back this season. So honestly, I've been thinking a lot about that. Um, I think that for one, I want them to have a lot of fun, because what I realized is hockey is such a privilege. Being at Princeton is such a privilege, and I don't always want it to be a grind. I want them to look back and say I had the best time, and that doesn't mean nobody's going to outwork us. It's who we are. We're going to get in there. We're going to grind and we're going to work. But I want them to really enjoy it, because what this season did was make us really look at how lucky we are to be there and how short our time is at Princeton, how short hockey is, and to have it taken away from you. I just want them to love it when they come back.
Yeah, I want to talk about some of those players. Two of your players, Thompson and Sarah Philia, made the training camp roster for Team Canada for the World Championships. What are your thoughts on them making that roster, and what do you hope for them to get out of that camp?
Well, I think they're both really deserving of being there. I think if we start with Claire, she just graduated. She wasn't even really in the program. U18, she never made the team. She's pretty new to the defense position, and just working with her for over 4 years and seeing her game go from like here to here, she's incredible. She's earned every opportunity she's gotten, and I really hope they take her on that roster for the world. She made the world's roster last year, and then of course because of COVID it was canceled, so it was taken away from her. And I'm really hoping she gets that opportunity to make the roster this year. I think she's earned it. I think when I watch those best on best, when I watch those training camps, she's right there with all of them. If not, I'm a little biased. I think she's amazing. And then Sarah, she's just like the best young player in the world. Like in her age group, she's incredible. Again, it hasn't even been easy for her, even though she's like 19 years old and in that roster, which is very young. Like she's worked so hard and had so much adversity to get there already in such a short time. And again, having her first world championships taken away from her last year, I think Sarah's got a really long career there. And I hope to see her make like the top six and be an impact player for the world championships.
Now, something that was introduced to college hockey this year was 3-on-3 overtime. As a coach, how does that change your approach preparing for overtime this year or next year?
Again, you have some great questions. We actually just talked about this in our head coach meeting with the ECAC, and it was interesting because I was one of the few coaches who said, "Yeah, let's give it a go." Because when I watch NHL, I find it really exciting. I think it looks really cool, and when you have some of the players with the individual talent that we have, it's kind of an advantage. But the reports back was it was really awful. The coaches didn't love it. The players ended up thinking they would love it and then hated it. Usually it's just the top few superstars that love it. But it's interesting because it's something we're going to have to practice, because it counts for a win or a loss, this 3-on-3. So you can go 60 minutes playing your systems, playing hard hockey, and then it comes to a totally different game at the end for 5 minutes. You could get 0 points out of that entire game if you can't play 3-on-3. So it's almost like the way you practice special teams. I think you're going to have to practice 3-on-3 overtime, because it's very likely to come up, and it could be the difference between earning a bid in the NCAA tournament or being left out.
hmm And I'm talking to other players. They say you have to be a little more defensively minded in those situations, because if you make one little defensive mistake, it can cause an odd man rush. Is that something you're going to try to preach to your players when they're in those situations?
I think what I'm going to have to do is see how we play it first, and just really collect all the information, let them play it as they would, practice it a lot, and then see what adjustments we need to make. Puck possession is critical in 3-on-3. You can't give that puck up to the other team.
hmm
So it will definitely be a focus.
And I want to transition a little bit and talk about the beginning of your hockey career. So you're from Ontario. How did you start playing hockey and falling in love with the sport?
Um, so I have two older brothers, and sounds like a very familiar narrative for a lot of my generation of women. My older brothers played. I was around the rinks watching them, and I was like 2.5 when they put the skates on me. It's just kind of what everybody did. My town had 1,000 people, so there wasn't much else going on. I played that until I was about 8, and I was the only girl. And then they said girls should play ringette, so I switched to this game called ringette, which was basically all girls back. It was a solution to hockey for girls. At 17, I ended up going to the Canada Games for ringette. And after that, I switched to hockey. It was a game I always loved, but it was kind of my brothers and my dad. But my dad really wanted me to always play. He would never push it. So when I decided that I had to leave ringette, I kind of did it for my dad, just, and just crazy opportunities happened. I was so lucky. Like, it doesn't happen the way today. It doesn't happen the way it did for me back then. I just went playing hockey in a tournament because I was having fun, and the Brown coach came calling, and it changed my life. So
Did you have a favorite player growing up that you looked up to?
yeah, Steve Eiserman, like obsessively looked up to him, posters all over my walls and ceiling. I had a stick signed by him. I watched everything. Back then there were not many. There was a couple of female players, but they played once every 4 years. So it wasn't like you could really follow them and have a good fandom. But today I love that now that instead of, they will, of course, young girls will still look up to NHL players, but it's amazing to me to think that they can look up to all these PWHPA and NWHL women and have female role models. But in my day, we really just had the NHL guys.
Yeah, I know it's weird because my dad loves Steve Eiserman as well, but like I only know him as the general manager of the Red Wings, and it's kind of
Right.
weird to thinking about him as a player and not as a general manager.
Yeah, he was a phenomenal player, and he's done a great job as a GM. Like, I think he's the reason Tampa got so good, and now he's
Yeah,
back home in Detroit. So we'll see how good they get.
definitely. Now, talk about a little bit about your playing career with Brown and what was that experience like for you?
Oh, it was the best 4 years of my life. I mean, there's nothing like college hockey. Even later on, when I played with the national team and went on and played in the original NWHL, there's nothing like college hockey. So I played at Brown. We were really good back then. We went to it wasn't called the Frozen Four, but we went to the Final Four 3 out of my 4 years. We actually lost the national championship game twice. I have no regrets. It was the best time. My best friends, my teammates were amazing. I love my coaches. I still keep in touch. Brown hockey was everything. It kind of made me who I am today.
How did your playing career at Brown help prepare you as a coach with Princeton today?
Well, first and foremost, having Digit Murphy as my coach showed me that women can coach. It showed me that mothers can coach. There were times where, she was nursing and she would have to figure it out with her baby coming along. She had 4 kids right in the middle of my career. She was extremely competitive. She demanded the most out of us, but we knew that in the end, she cared about us, and that's why she pushed us so hard. So having her as a female role model and just understanding the work ethic and the compete level, when we played at Brown, I think that really shaped the way I coach.
And what made you want to be a coach at the beginning?
I didn't, to tell you the truth, I didn't really know it was a career back when I played. They didn't pay very much money at all. It's really demanding on family life, especially then, because we would play Saturday, Sundays. And so you never had a weekend with your family. You practice over dinner time every night. I really didn't think of it, but I always was coaching on some level. I coached all through college. I actually coached Brown's JV women's team as a student. And honestly, 10 years later, I realized that my nickname that my coaches called me was CIT, which meant coach in training. But I actually never thought about coaching. I knew I wanted to teach. And so I kind of went that route after college. I was a teacher, and so teachers end up coaching. And then fast forward 8 or 9 years later, we were in Arizona, and I was like, it's time for me to start my career. And I had just finished again a master's of education and was kind of teaching. And then I realized, wait, I should look into this coaching thing as like a full-time gig. And, I called a lot of Division I college coaches, and they said, no, don't do it. They said, it's too hard on a mom. It's not a good lifestyle. Like, it's really not worth it. And these were a lot of men, obviously, back then. But I don't know, something was just calling me, and I started. And today I think it's the best profession for mothers. I have 3 daughters, and they get to see the most gifted student athletes in the world. They get to be around the best role models every day. They get to see their mom competing and succeeding and strategizing and planning, and they can see, what I'm doing in person when they come to games. So yeah, I didn't want to get into it, and it was one of the best decisions I made.
How do you balance having a family and being a coach at the same time?
I mean, truthfully, you don't. People talk about work life balance. There's really not. You don't. You're always dropping a ball. You can't have all the balls going at once, and so you have to cut yourself some slack. You have to know that some days you might not have done as good a job in your video session as you had planned because you had to stay up with your daughter about anything, or you might miss a recital, you might miss one of your daughter's sports events, you might miss, and so you are going to drop balls, and you have to just cut yourself some slack to know you can't be everything to everybody at the same time. It's really super hard. You just do the best you can in the moment, and being present is something that I had to work on, because when I'm home, to be quite honest, with our devices, like, I'm getting emails for work, I'm talking with recruits. And so trying to schedule, like, be present. When I'm at work, I'm at work. And when I'm at home, I'm at home. I'm not perfect at it. It's really hard. And so it's really tough to do, but you have understanding children, you have understanding spouses, and you can make it work.
Now, you were an assistant with Princeton before making the jump as the head coach. Wasn't it an adjustment being an assistant and now being the head coach?
Yeah, it was an adjustment. And when people ask me about it, I often think it's easier to go from an assistant to a head coach in a different program, because the hardest part for me was they had always known me and know how I operate, but now I couldn't become somebody different, even though I was changing positions and had to be a little bit different. When you're an assistant, you get a little bit closer relationship with the players. You get to be a little bit more fun. You don't have to make the hard decisions that weigh on you. So the hard part was they all knew me one way, but I had to stay authentically me, but I'm in a different role. And then them knowing, well, this isn't how we did it before. This isn't how we did it before. So it's hard for them to understand that, hey, this is my program now, and I'm going to do it a little bit differently, even though they had seen me the whole time. So it's an adjustment. It definitely is an adjustment. You never sleep as well, and you don't have as many friends. That's for sure what happens. And I do think it's easier if you leave and go to a new program where they don't know you as anyone different. You can then establish who you would like to be in that head coach role. But, it took a couple of years, and then we were rolling again. So.
And one question I ask all the players I have on the podcast is I like to talk to them about their recruiting process. Now, you're the first head coach to come on the podcast. So what's the recruiting process like as a head coach?
It's changed so much in the 10 years I've been coaching. It used to be they were deciding junior, senior year, coming on all their visits when I first started. So they were a little older, more mature, knew kind of what they wanted. Then all of a sudden it went all the way to 7th and 8th graders, which got really crazy. You would have to make decisions in 2 weeks. You hadn't had time to get to know them, to see them. You don't know who they're going to grow into. A 13, 14-year-old girl is totally different from an 18, 19-year-old girl. So predicting what they're going to become was extremely difficult. Now it's backed up a little bit, but with COVID giving us a dead period for the last year, it's going to be a challenge coming into this cycle on June 15th. It's going to be a challenge, but how it works is you go watch as much as you can. So we used to be able to talk to them regularly, try to get to know them, get to know their family, but there's no communication until June 15th after sophomore year. And I'm worried this year that the process is going to be too rushed. So we're not going to have time to really know, and you're taking some gambles, because there's pressure on the head coaches as well, because players will have offers from 3 other schools, so you need to make a decision on this player, and you might not even be ready. So it is challenging. It's challenging to balance your numbers. It's challenging to get the right people in, and for me, culture is everything. So when you don't have time to really get to know the recruit and their family, it's very risky, and I'm not comfortable with it. I'd like to take time, know who they are, know what they want in life, understand if they're going to be a good fit in the locker room, because that is a place that I cherish.
And how do you decide where to watch players? Because there seems to be a bunch of different leagues in women's hockey. There's the PWHL, there's obviously Minnesota high school hockey, and then there's other places in New England. Like, how do you decide which place you're going to watch a player?
We go everywhere. Like, one time I spent 48 hours in Sweden, and that's where I found Josephine Bovang, who is an incoming freshman who's just crushing it over there. I go to Ontario, and I have my assistant coaches are traveling all the time. So we'll be in Ontario, Western Canada, Eastern Canada, Massachusetts, New England, Chicago area, Minnesota area. And then you hit basically the big showcase events. So you start to understand which ones some of the top kids are going to in these showcases or tournaments. And when you hit those ones right, you can see a lot of the best talent all in one spot. But it's really hard work, and you're on the road a ton.
Definitely. And is it different recruiting as an Ivy League school versus other schools? Because I know there's not the letter of intention that a lot of players sign when you go to an Ivy League school.
Yeah, it is. It is different. There's a lot of similarities, but there's a few differences. And when you're deciding on these quote offers, we don't deal with money. So financial aid is completely separate. The parents will find out from our financial aid department what it would cost to attend Princeton. So I'm not offering a full scholarship, a 75%, a 50. I really enjoy that as an Ivy League. I don't have to value my players differently. I value them all the same. Like, they're all extremely important to our program. And in our locker room, they're not looking at each other like, how come she has a full and I have a half? So that part I really enjoy of the Ivy League. It also makes it harder because there are players and families who just are like, I don't want to pay for school. And so that weeds out some. Our academics definitely weed out a lot more. You have to find the hockey players who are driven academically. Surprisingly, it's, sometimes it's tricky, but sometimes it's surprisingly easy because usually young women who are driven in all areas of their life. So if they're driven in hockey, they don't want to fail. They want to be the best at what they do. So when they're in the classroom, they give that same kind of effort. And those are the type of players we're looking for in our program.
Yeah, and talking to the coaches, that's like the big thing is like, is it like true that if you don't have good enough grades, like some coaches won't look at you because you need to have a certain requirement to play?
So normally that part comes in second. I'll go look for the best hockey players that play the style that I think will fit in well with us. The second thing, so first and foremost, I'm looking at their hockey talent and their compete level and their passion. And that's what I look for on the ice. Then my second criteria is culturally, are they going to fit in? Are they, selfless? Are they team first? Or, are they kind of into it for more self-promotion reasons? And I make sure that culturally they're going to fit, and then we look at their grades.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that's the third thing. It can weed people out, or it's like, hey, normally, to tell you the truth, for some reason it doesn't weed as many out as you would think, because like I said, when they're driven on the ice and they're great people off the ice, they usually have grades that are really good also. So, but I look at it third.
Now, what advice would you give a younger player who's trying to get noticed by Division I schools?
I would give advice that sounds fluffy and doesn't always come true, but you got to love what you're doing. I think too many times players see sports, and let's use ice hockey specifically, as a means to an end. I'm playing this because I want to get into a good school. I'm doing this because I want to play D1. When you put your motivation based on end results, you don't enjoy the moment, and you're not going to succeed. So the people I think who do the best are playing hockey because they love hockey and they let the other stuff come. Now, do you have to be proactive? Yes. In your recruiting, you have to be in control of your situation to the best you can by making sure people are aware that you're interested in that. But when you focus on the end goal instead of the game itself, your motivation's in the wrong place. And then what happens is, if you do make that end goal, you haven't loved it the whole time. And when you come to college hockey, Division I and Division III, it's a grind. And so what was fun becomes work. And if you don't absolutely love it and wake up every day excited to get to the rink, it might not be the right thing for you. So I would say, make sure you're loving it, love every minute of it, and do it because you love it and not because you want to go play Division I hockey.
Now, last season, your team won the Ecac Championship. You started off that playoff run playing Quinnipiac. Take me through that series, and what was the key to winning that series? Because that seemed like it was a grind for your team because of all the overtimes you had to play.
Oh my goodness. I think we had the toughest path in the NCAA. All the teams we faced, starting from the quarterfinals, were top 10 ranked in the country. So we had Quinnipiac first. And so their coach actually was my teammate at Brown, and they play hard. It was like full brawl, full checking, extremely physical. It was fast. It was fierce. It was a grind. 2 overtimes. Like the second game went into overtime and we lost it. And then the third game went into double overtime. And we came in, I think our fitness was key for that. I think that, we just had a lot of heart and soul, and we had some talented kids. And in the very end, our 3 best forwards came out on a 3-on-1, and they're going to score 9 times out of 10. So that series was amazing. And I think it helped prepare us when we went into the Final Four.
Yeah, and I guess like since physicality is starting to become a key part of women's hockey, do you think hitting should be allowed in women's hockey?
Oh man, you're coming up with some great ones. So when I played, it pretty much was checking hockey. Most of us came from boys hockey at some level and played checking. And when I played in college, they didn't call anything. Like you could, if someone chipped the puck by as a D, you could stand them up. It's not interference. You could hit on the boards. The only thing they really called was open ice, big checks. And it was great. And it was suited to me because I wasn't so skilled, but I could be physical and I could skate. So for me, it was great. Then the game got very skilled and they called everything. So I get asked this question 5-6 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I would have said, yes, let the women hit. But today, and this is going to not be received well by most hockey people, I almost wonder if we should take checking out of the men's game, take it out of both. And I say that because when you watch really high level international hockey, there's very little checking, and it's a phenomenal product. I would want to see the literature on concussions, and if taking checking out would reduce concussions significantly, then I say take it out of everything and let's let the skill and the speed rise to the top. If they said, there's no difference in the concussion numbers for hitting versus non-hitting, then I would have no problem bringing it into the women's game too. I'll tell you what, it's a lot easier to play checking hockey than it is to play non-checking.
Definitely. I think you're already seeing it kind of come out of the men's game. Like when you watch the NHL today versus 10 years ago, it's a completely different game. So I think it would definitely add something different to the game that, and especially in the men's game, that you wouldn't see before.
Yeah. Even when you watch the Frozen Four, you see a couple big hits, but by, Duluth in that 5 overtime game, like they're not really hitting that much anymore because it's so physically demanding, and the game was amazing. So I think you've got a great product either way. And to me, if you could reduce concussions by eliminating checking, I think you'd have a lot more speed and skill, and you'd still have a phenomenal product.
Definitely. Now let's talk about the final game when you played Cornell. What was that comeback like? Take me what was going through your head, and especially beating them in their own building.
Oh my goodness. That's a game I'm never going to forget. So, we went in with the mentality, we had come off the 5-0 win over Clarkson, which was huge. Most of our team hadn't beaten Clarkson very often. So that was huge. I didn't realize Princeton had never been in the ECAC championship game before. I didn't realize that until like the night before when someone told me. So we were excited. And the idea was to just come out really strong. Like we put our best face-off person in there and win the draw, get it in deep, let them know we're here. Obviously, it did not happen that way. We were down 2-0 within 3 minutes. It was alarming. And it was like they took the breath out of us, right? It was like sucked all the air out of our bench. And I was looking like, what do I do? Geez, what do you do in this moment? Do I call a timeout? You get 1 timeout per game. Do I call it now, 3 minutes into the game, and like blast them? You got to do better than this. Do I pull our goalie, Steph Neepy, who was one of the best goalies in the NCAA senior year? She just won best goalie in Sweden, by the way, like phenomenal goalie. Do I pull her? Because our backup goalie had played the double overtime win against Quinnipiac. So we were kind of splitting at that point. I was like, I'm not sure what I should do. And I looked down, and our other goalie, Cassie, started to dance to the music. And I'm like, oh no. And then the defense started dancing with her. And then the bench is dancing. And I was like, okay, do I stop this? And it was just feeling. I just had to like feel. And they started to bring this energy. The only thing I said is, hey, guess what? We have 57 more minutes of hockey. And they started to play. And, we got out of that period and it was 2-0. And it could have been much worse, but we stopped the bleeding and we started to take over. And then it was amazing. What happened was the culture of our program really started to shine. The players had total confidence that they could come back and win. They were having fun. They just got together and said, let's do this. And by the time we were going into the third, it was a tie game. And I knew when we scored our first goal, Carly Bullock scored it, who was like our biggest scorer. When she scored that goal, I knew we were going to win the game. I could tell by the way the body language of the Cornell bench. I could tell by the body language of the Cornell players. I could tell by the way they were like gripping their sticks and playing their game. And I could tell by the way our attitude on our bench was. So I knew we were going to win at that moment. And then when the overtime goal happened, I actually it was the worst celebration I've ever had, because I thought they were definitely going to review it, because I couldn't see how it got tipped in over the goalie, and I knew it was a weird goal, which they did end up reviewing. But honestly, it was a culture thing. At that moment, it wasn't even about X's and O's or strategy or making adjustments. Of course, we did that and we were well prepared for the game, but it was about all the intangibles that they had been through all season. I think the triple or the double overtime game against Quinnipiac, and knowing they can win those tight games, that helped us win the championship game.
Yeah, and Carly Bullock was obviously a key player in your team last year. What was it like coaching her, and how are you going to try to replace her impact that she had in the team for next year?
Yeah, we're not going to replace her. You're not ever going to replace a player like that. She is the most natural goal scorer I've ever coached. My biggest challenge with her was teaching her to play the back half of the game, and teaching her to back check, and teaching her that you have to play without the puck, and teaching her that team defense matters. And by the end of senior year, she was our most valuable player. She blocked shots, she back checked, she beat icings, all the things that, we have these effort clips and effort plays. She would lead our team in that. And I think people miss that. They just saw her as this goal scorer, and they didn't realize that she was doing all the little things, because she is the most fierce competitor that we had on our team. Now in practice, I tease her. She is not a practice kid at all. But when it came to games, she wasn't going to let anyone beat her on any spot on that ice. So she's not going to be replaced. She's a special player. But that's how college hockey works. You lose some, you bring new ones in, and you hope you can form your team around new players.
Definitely. Now, we're in the non-hockey segment of the podcast where I like to ask you
Okay.
some non-hockey questions. My first
Uh-oh.
question to you is, what music do you like to listen to? And what's your go-to song
I
before?
usually just have top 40 on, whatever my daughters, I have middle schoolers and high schoolers. So basically whatever they're listening to, I end up listening to.
Now, what is your favorite road arena to coach in?
Brown. I love going home. I love that rink. So that's my favorite place to coach.
Now, what was your favorite class you ever took in college?
Oh, Magic in the Middle Ages. It was pretty cool. It was taught by a witch, and he was amazing. And we learned to cast circles. I loved it.
What is your favorite TV show?
Oh, This Is Us right now. I love This Is Us. I can't get enough of it. It's great.
Now,
Oh, and sorry, Schitt's Creek though. That one was amazing. It's perfect Canadian humor, and I watched the whole season in like the first 2 weeks of COVID.
oh, nice. I've never seen that show, but I definitely have to get on that
Oh, you have
eventually.
to watch it.
It's just
It's
been
so
busy with
funny.
the college hockey season going around, but I have some time now, so I'll definitely try to watch it.
Yeah.
Now, final non-hockey question to you is, if you could have lunch with anyone in the world, who would it be and why?
Gosh, I only get one person. Honestly, I'd probably pick Oprah, because she's met with so many amazing people that, by transitive properties, I'd end up having lunch with a ton. But I think she'd be really cool, because she's an incredible woman. She made her own success in her life. She came from very little, and she's talked with some of the most fascinating people in the world.
Now, final question to you is, what should be done to help grow women's hockey?
We got to do more try hockey for free. We have to make a more concerted effort, especially in the States, to make U8, U10 girls teams, to like teach parents that it's an option for them. I think we could get a lot more exposure around our NCAA tournament. I think we got to go out and bring the tournament, like bring the NCAA tournament to where there's a lot of youth teams playing, and have double tournaments. And our players, they put on clinics every Sunday to try to get girls to come out and get exposed to the game. But we have to do a much better job, like advertising it, advocating for our players, and exposing people to it for free.
Now, do you have any shout outs you'd like to give to any of your former teammates, current players you coach, or family members, or anyone else who you might think will be listening to this?
Oh my goodness. Well, I gave my shout out to Digit because she will probably definitely listen. I think just my teammates from college. I think one thing in the pandemic is it's been cool to reconnect with the people that have been far apart from you, and we kind of get together. All my teammates. I also played field hockey at Brown, so we get together, once a month over Zoom. And I'd give a shout out to all of them. All my Brown teammates and roommates just definitely shaped my life. So.
Is it weird coaching against Coach Thompson for Quinnipiac since you guys were teammates?
Yeah. Turner, Coach
Oh,
Turner.
my bad. Sorry.
That's okay. It is and it isn't. Like she coaches like she played, which is really intense, physical, and really disciplined. I love it when we're on the benches, we're like competitors, and then when we leave the benches, we support each other in everything. And so I think that relationship is really cool.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Cara. It really means a lot to me. You're the first ever coach to come on the podcast,
Uh,
so I appreciate it. Stay safe, take care, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Now, one question